Mom said, sticks and stones, sticks and stones.
Mm.
And I said, well, they say I'm black. And she says, you're not black. You were born white. Your hair was straight. They gave you medication and that turned your skin darker and that made your hair curl. Before that,
Yeah.
your hair was perfectly straight. And I thought, okay.
Hey there, it's Melissa Brunetti, and welcome to the Mind Your Own Karma podcast.
Hey there, Karma Crew. Thanks for joining me for this episode of Mind Your Own Karma, the Adoption Chronicles. Today, I have Shawn on the show. In 1963, Shawn was placed for adoption because his white mother's family didn't want a biracial grandson. As an infant, he passed for white, so he was adopted by a racist, rural Indiana family who didn't realize that he was Black. Ashamed of his ethnicity, his mom concocted lies to hide his race from everyone, including Shawn. This lack of racial identity caused depression, confusion, and conflict with his education, relationships, and career. But his mom insisted that he was not to search for his birth family until after she died. Around age 40, Shawn and his wife decided that they were well suited to adopt other biracial babies. Through the adoption process, Shawn discovered clues that helped him locate and reunite with his biological family. Although Shawn's author name for his book, Born Without a Race, is Dr. Michael Bauer, he wishes to be addressed in this interview as Shawn for personal reasons. Here is my interview with Shawn. So we are welcoming Shawn to the show today. Hi, Shawn.
Hello.
I am so glad you are on the show. You are an author of Born Without a Race. You're
That's
a
right.
transracial adoptee. And I love your book because it brings so many different dynamics in. It's not just an adoptee book or an adoption book. So I feel like other people will pick it up and read it that aren't adoptees and maybe get educated. And that's really what this show is all about, is educating people about adoption. So I feel like you're going to draw in other people, not just adoptees, and maybe they'll learn some things. So thank you so much for putting that out in the world.
Oh, you're welcome. Yeah, it talks on a lot of racial identity issues
Yeah.
and what happens if you don't know your racial identity. How do you
Yeah.
identify? And that was me. So,
Yeah. Yeah. And thank you for educating me on that because there were so many things I didn't even think of. I know being transracial and an adoptee just adds a whole nother layer of challenges, being an adoptee that's transracial. So thanks for educating me as well. So
you're
let's
welcome.
educate the world today with your story. So let's kind of start at the beginning. Tell us what you believed growing up and what you know now is the truth about why you were placed for adoption by your biological mother.
Um, Let me start with my biological mother's story because that helps a lot
Yes.
understanding when I tell you what I believed growing up. So, my biological mother grew up on a tobacco farm in southern Indiana, just around the Ohio River. Her father was a tobacco farmer, her mother was a teacher, and she wanted to follow in her mother's footsteps. So, she went to a teacher's college up here in northeastern Indiana. And she graduated and got her teaching degree, and she had a really tight group of friends, and they're still together. Um, and one in particular was a nice lady who eventually that became her wife. But at the time, they were kind of seeing each other on and off like college students do.
Hmm.
But when she graduated with her teaching degree, she wanted to go on and earn her master's. And she had all these friends. And so she just re enrolled in the same college. During breaks from school, she would go back to her hometown and stay with her parents. And there was a mental health facility near there. And she volunteered as an associate instructor there. And that's where she met my father. So it's like, how did those two get together? You have to know
Yeah.
that. He was not a patient. He worked there.
Good.
Sure,
Let's
we make
clarify
that
that.
specific. Yeah. So they had a fling, and he was a fun guy. Um, they had a lot of fun together. But when she was down there, she was seeing him, and when she was up here, she was seeing um, her future wife. I'll call her
Mhm.
Wanda. That's what I called her in the book.
Okay.
Um, yeah. So when she became pregnant after one of their little flings down in southern Indiana, she had a problem. So my father was married with three kids and one on the way. and he did not want to interrupt his family. He was very happy with his family, and she didn't want him to interrupt his family. And the other complication is he was Black. So that kind of takes her family out of the picture because her father was second generation Irish, her mother was second generation German, and they was racist. And once my birth mother in high school, they took a church trip down through the southern states, and one of the girls in that group had a darker complexion, and they were afraid of where to go. So this is in the 1950s. So there's still white and colored water fountains. There's white and colored restrooms. And they're all circling around the one girl with a darker complexion, afraid that she's going to get arrested for going into the wrong restaurant.
Oh, wow.
So that was her background and thinking of, did she want to go through with that with the baby? She said, where am I going to take him to the bathroom if he has to go? So she left her parents' home and never spoke of it, and moved back in, and her future wife took her in, and she moved in with her parents, and she took care of her all during the pregnancy, and she drove my mother to the hospital at the university when she went into labor with me. So the three of them were there. And this is significant as to why I chose your adoption or your podcast, because 60 years later to the day, my birth mother's wife had a massive stroke, and she was in the same hospital. And my birth mother called, and I thought she was wishing me happy birthday, and I was working. I didn't take the call, and she said, Wanda's had a stroke. We're at the hospital. So I went all rushed right over there, and that was the end of her life. So we were there after the beginning of my life, and it was the end of her life 60 years later. So that's what I thought was karma. And when I was looking at different podcasts, I thought, I think somebody that specializes in karma will find that interesting. So I'm asked you would you have me as a guest, and you were kind enough to let me on. So I appreciate that.
Yeah, cool. Well, I didn't know that story, so that's interesting.
So when I was born, she didn't want to list the father because that would mean the lawyers would have to contact him, and that I was a secret. So she filled out her information, but she didn't fill out his.
Yeah.
So there was no discussion of what my race was. And when I was born, I was very sick. Now let's switch to my adoptive parents. They're from a very white community. My grandfather was in the Ku Klux Klan. My dad's brothers, several of them were in the Ku Klux Klan, and some of my first cousins were in the Klan also. On my mom's side, they were just as racist. I never saw their KKK cards, but I've heard some incredible racist things. Right. So I have no doubt if my parents knew that I was half Black, they would never have adopted me. So when they got me home, well, it took a while because I was born with some genetic disorders. You probably have never heard of Pfeiffer syndrome. It's not very common, but I had
heard of it, but I wasn't familiar with what it all entailed.
If you Google it, you'll see that Prince's son had Pfeiffer syndrome, and he died shortly after birth. So I had a lot of problems when I was born. I had 3 surgeries. I was in and out of the hospital a great deal. So they didn't really have me until I was later on. And you really couldn't. My race wasn't a big issue. I had no hair. I have blue eyes.
Yeah.
I was jaundiced. So, it was just never discussed.
Yeah.
So eventually after I was 3 and I had my 3rd surgery, then they brought me home, and then they started to see some of my Black characteristics. My hair grew in curly, and I turned much darker in the summer than their other 2 kids. I should have said why they adopted. They adopted because they'd been married for 10 years and wanted to buy a plot of land and raise some horses and cows, and they needed boys to do that. So they adopted my older brother about 2 years before me. Then when they closed on the land, they decided one boy wasn't enough, so they adopted another boy. That was me. Now, it got more complicated. I was healthier after age 3, but mom was finally able to carry a baby to delivery. So 3 years and 3 days after I was born, she had her own son,
Mm-hmm.
and he was the golden child. He was the heir to the throne, and
Yeah.
me and my brother, like Prince Harry, we were spares.
Yeah. Yeah.
so
So that was
so we did
evident to you
that.
growing up that that was the
It was
dynamic.
evident. It was evident to everybody, but they were not very truthful to me and my brother. They always said, "Oh, we treat us all the
Yeah.
same.
Yeah.
We treat you all the same." But anybody that was paying attention could see that they don't treat us all the same.
Mm.
Um, when To give an example of that, when I was 3 after my third surgery, then my asthma became a problem. That was a gift from my biological father, but
Hmm.
my parents knew nothing about asthma, and they were doing a lot of things that made it worse, but they didn't know that.
Yeah.
So the doctors didn't know how to treat me, so they sent me to the best pediatric pulmonologist in the state. He's right downtown on the Circle of Indianapolis on the top floor. German guy. I still remember he's had a beard and he had an accent. He reminded me of Sigmund Freud later on. Not when I was 3, but when
Yeah.
I saw Sigmund Freud, I thought, hey, that's Dr. Kraft. And now he's on the top floor, and the building has 7 floors. So mom's taking me there, and she's claustrophobic. So she is not going up the elevator.
Oh
So
no.
she drags a 3-year-old up these steps, and we're running late. So we're running. I get up to his office, and I'm about to die.
Yeah.
So I can barely breathe. So he sends me right to the hospital. Says I'm the worst case he'd ever seen.
Oh wow.
And so I spent a couple of weeks in an oxygen tent, and on and off from age 3 to 6, I spent a lot of time in oxygen tents. Do you know what those are?
Yeah, I think I was in one when I was a
Really?
baby because I had pneumonia.
Oh, okay. So you know what it's like.
Yeah.
Yeah. So yeah, I was in one. And I can remember when I was 5 and 6 being in one. And after my asthma got under control that first time, he had me back. And I wasn't a happy camper. I didn't like being in the oxygen tent. I didn't like this doctor. I
Yeah.
didn't like going up all those steps, but I was breathing well enough. He could examine me at least. And my mom said I was not very cooperative. And he said, at least you brought him here before he was a total brat.
Oh wow.
Yeah. She says, well, I can't spank him. If I spank him, he coughs and then he coughs and he goes into asthma attacks.
Oh gosh.
And this German high level pediatric pulmonologist said he won't die of an asthma attack. If he needs a beating, you give him a beating.
Wow.
And so spare the rod and spoil the child became mom and dad's mission statement from
Oh
that
my
day on.
gosh.
So I got
Wow.
quite a bit. My older brother got the most beating, and he was so
Mm.
abused physically and emotionally. He moved out when he was 17. He was done.
Wow.
Um, I was next. I got it. The younger brother
Never
never.
got it. Wow.
Yeah, if we were both doing something, mom would smack me and say, "Next time you're getting it," and there was never a next time for him to get it. um,
Wow. What was it like growing up in a racist family and a racist community?
um, Mom tried to hide it, and it was very difficult. But yeah, in school, I was the only kid of my color. In high school, there might have been one a few years older than me, but I don't remember ever interacting with him, and all the other kids were white. So it was difficult. Mom tried to hide it. When I'd come home crying from the bus because someone had called me a nigger or hit me, punched me, made fun of my hair, mom said, "Sticks and stones, sticks and stones."
Mm.
And I said, "Well, they say I'm black." And she's, "You're not black. You were born white. Your hair was straight. They gave you medication, and that turned your skin darker, and that made your hair curl. Before that,
Yeah.
your hair was perfectly straight." And I thought, okay.
Yeah.
so
Yeah.
so I was small still, and so I just took it. I just took
Mm.
all that bullying all through school. Eventually, I quit riding the bus. I started walking or riding my bike the 2 miles. And then when my older brother was old enough, he would drive, so he would drop me off. And then when I got my license, I drove. I didn't go down certain hallways in the high school.
Wow.
I went to Catholic grade school, so I was somewhat protected because everybody knew everybody. We all went to church together, and they knew who I was. And nobody really questioned that. But when I went to public school, hey, look at him.
Yeah.
So I had to stay away from certain hallways and certain lockers. I didn't eat lunch in the cafeteria even once, all through high school.
Wow.
Um, I just got through there and kept a low profile. Graduated first in my class, gathered up all my scholarships, and left.
Yeah. At what point did you start questioning your racial identity? Do you remember?
Um, Besides the school bus, just telling them, mom just said, "Don't wear your feelings on the sleeve. That they're just trying to upset you. So ignore that." So I quit questioning it then. But when I got to college, I went as far as my scholarship money would take me, which was IU Bloomington, which is still mostly white back then, but it was a very international community. The Dalai Lama's brother settled there in Bloomington, and there were people from every part of the world there. And living in the dorms and going to classes, people would ask me, "What nationality are you? Are you coming to the black study table?" I don't know if I'm black or not. Are you Jewish? There was a guy on my floor who was Jewish. He's asked me about, going to the church or the synagogue with him. I said, "I'm not Jewish." You look Jewish. I don't know. I'm adopted.
Yeah.
Um, Middle Eastern. I mean, professors from all over the world. Israel, Egypt, Pakistan. They're all asking me,
Wow.
are you from here? Are you from there? And especially the one from Egypt. I said, well, I'm not. Well, I can't say that because that'll give away the name of the town that I grew up in. But um, so at the Christmas break, I went back to mom and said, look, everybody's guessing what national I am. Can I see my adoption pages and go through it and see if there's anything that indicates what nationality I am?
Yeah.
And she just repeated, no,
Mm.
you're white, medication made you look that way. But then she added to the story but the lawyer did say that you would be smart because one of your parents was a rocket scientist and the other one was a brain surgeon. Now, I thought, really? And that made me feel good. It's like, wow, that's what I am. Okay, I'll
Yeah.
take that.
Yeah.
So I took that and ran with it. But
Yeah.
I think that was a lie she made up because her biological son didn't do nearly as well in school as I did, and the teachers were like, "Oh, you Shawn's brother?" It's like
What happened?
they expected more from you,
Right. Yep.
and so she told him and told the teachers, "Yeah, no, you can't compare him to Shawn. Shawn's parents were a brain surgeon and a rocket scientist." So
Yep.
so that I went
That's
through
the story.
college. Went back second semester freshman year, and my German professor and I got along really well. And in fact, we shared a Greyhound bus back at spring break going home. And he, we were speaking in German the whole time, and he was telling me about his trips. And he said, "You're so natural at German for only having a little bit you've had." He says, "Are you German?" And I don't know, I'm adopted. So he said, "I can tell in your eyes you're German. You should go to Germany." So I thought, okay, someday. He says, "No, I mean now." He says, I said, my parents will never pay for me to go to Germany. He says, "There's a program where you can go and you'll study in Berlin, well, West Berlin, because I'm old and it was divided back then.
Hmm.
And you'll study there for a month, and then you go to work at Bayer chemical plant in Cologne, and you pay off your debt, and you end up owing nothing."
Wow.
Wow. I said, "That's offered from one of the satellite campuses." So I visited that campus and applied, and they accepted me. So that's how. Okay, think I'm German, so I'm going to go to Germany.
Wow.
And I get there, and we're studying with a group from Finland, and nobody there really questions what I am. But we're all together, and we're all 19, 20. We're having a good time. We're away from home, and we hang out together, and we're walking across the pedestrian plaza there in Berlin, going from place to place looking for a bar, I think. And we come across a group of punks. And when I say punks, I mean black leather, colored mohawks,
Okay.
piercings,
Hmm.
spikes. and they're skateboarding there at the pedestrian plaza. One of the ugly Americans says something in English he doesn't think they'll understand, but they understood.
Oh
And
no.
the guy closest came to him and broke his nose with one blow. And then their whole group was on our whole group. And the one that came from me stopped short. He drove back and he said, "Are you Turkish?" in German. And I thought, I really don't know how to explain I'm adopted. I don't know what
Right.
race I am in German.
Yeah.
So I just said, "Yeah, I'm Turkish." And so he goes, "Good, good." Then he went and beat up another guy from my group. Poor George. Sorry, George. But then I thought, all right, I came here thinking I'm German. I find out I'm Turkish. Then I have a good time in Berlin, get to Cologne, and when we go to the factory, the foreman asked me, "Are you Turkish?" And I'm like, "Heck yeah, I'm Turkish." But Turkish were migrant workers in Germany at the time,
Oh.
maybe still now, kind of like Hispanics have more difficult jobs here. So I was given the worst shifts and the worst
Oh
jobs
my
that they
gosh.
had. And it was night shift. So, I just did it. I grew up shoveling manure, baling hay, splitting logs. Dad heated with wood. So he wouldn't pay a gas company or anything. So, I was used to dirty jobs. That didn't bother me. And I had my days free, and somebody had loaned me a bike, and I rode all over the immediate area. I rode from Cologne to Dusseldorf. And what that meant was I was outside a lot in the sun, and I got dark again. I got
Mm.
really, really dark. Mom and dad had a pool, but I wasn't allowed to go into the pool during daytime hours. And that
Wow.
was something I didn't realize till much, much later.
Wow.
Looking at the old pictures, mom always had me in long pants and long shirt, and my younger brother's buck naked running around in the
Wow.
backyard. But I had to cover up. And
Wow.
it's, she was keeping me from tanning.
Yeah.
So I'm in Germany and I'm tan, and I don't go to anybody to cut my hair because I don't know if they know how to cut my hair. So I had a full afro by the end of that. And my very last week, I was standing on a scaffolding working on a piece of equipment, and one of the guys named Dieter came and crashed into it with his fork truck and knocked me to the ground. And I fell pretty hard. And I got up and I'm ready to fight. The other workers break up the fight, and the foreman calls over a German work student, tells him to take me to the infirmary. And the guy that hit the scaffolding. He called me a name, and I wish I could remember it, but I just don't. And I asked the German work student when we were walking to the infirmary, I said, "What did he call me?" And he said it was a racial slur for someone with dark skin, like an
Mm.
African. So he said, "Probably close to the N word
Mm-hmm.
in your country." So, oh, okay. So I started out thinking I'm German, told I'm Turkish, and then now I'm African.
Yeah.
Okay. So I checked out okay, but human resources, the other work student, told them what happened, and they decided they would give me medical leave for the rest of the week, and then I wouldn't have to go back into that. So I come back to the United States, fly into O'Hare. Mom and dad are picking me up, and they're asking me about this. And that's the next time I questioned mom about my heritage. I said, "Okay, this is what they think. They think I'm Turkish. They think I'm German. they think I'm African. Is there any clue of what I am in my adoption papers?" And mom and dad had some friends drive up. So I'm asking this in front of the friends, and that does not make mom happy. So she kind of grits her teeth and repeats the same stories that she's always told me. I said, okay, I'm not getting anywhere with this.
Yeah.
But I go back to college, and the same thing keeps happening. People asking me where I am because I'm always meeting new people. They don't know who I am. Other adoptees say, "Oh, I'm triggered when I go to the doctor and they ask for family history." I'm
Mm.
asked every day what race I am. I
Yeah.
can't answer it. I'm triggered. Well, not every day, but 3 or 4 times a week, I'm triggered.
Yeah. How
And
did how did that affect like your personal relationships, like not having an identity when you started having relationships later
I
on?
I withdrew from people. I just lived by myself, and if people were getting too close, then I would run away. I would go camping somewhere in the woods down near Bloomington, just by myself, walk trails. Just really didn't have very many friends there as the college went on. I did just the people in class. I didn't date. through high school. I guess I should say that. So let's go back to the adoption story. How did I find out I was adopted? My dad sat me down and said there was a whole room full of baby boys and he picked me. I said, okay, that's great. Mom said, I found you lying in the garden underneath a cabbage leaf. You're the ugliest thing I ever saw. And I had pity on you and I took you home.
Oh my
And
gosh.
she repeated over and over, you're the ugliest thing I ever saw. So I just had no,
Wow.
self-image of any self-confidence. And, the people in my high school, they're all white. I stand out. I don't feel comfortable, being around anybody then. So I was very much a loner.
Yeah.
I
But you did date, I mean, and you kind of had a crazy relationship that you wrote about in the book.
Okay, that's a good one. That's where you're going.
I mean,
Okay, so I graduated and I interviewed at different places. I took a job in northern Indiana for a while, and it was too much like my parents' hometown, so I just couldn't stand it. So I was licensed in South Carolina and Kentucky, so I took a trip and I ended up interviewing at a place in Myrtle Beach. And it was a very professional office, and I really liked it, so I accepted the job. So my job was doing eye exams on tourists that came down and waded out in the ocean and lost their glasses. Because this is 1991, nobody has a cell phone, there's no internet, so they need to come in and get another exam. And that was a great job, but it only lasted during the tourist season. Then that doctor that hired me let me know that he was part of this national or statewide chain, and I was assigned to all these different communities, and they would bring me in to solve problems that the other doctors couldn't see. And in the first year I was in South Carolina, I worked in 30 different offices. And then because I was at Myrtle Beach, I turned dark, even darker than I did in Germany. And I let my hair grow out because I was, late 20s, and the light bothered my eyes. So I started wearing amber colored contacts. Well, eventually, I caught the attention of the owner. So I was doing such a good job, he decided to move me to Columbia, which was the busiest office in the chain. And when I got there, it's like, oh, people didn't like it. People shied away from me. The white staff there in particular treated me like dirt, like I was the lowest person in the whole company. But there was three black people that were on staff, and they treated me like I was royalty. And I really wasn't understanding what was going on because I still didn't have an identity, a racial identity. In fact, I was so depressed when I lived in South Carolina, I attempted suicide once.
Yeah.
But when I got to Columbia, the receptionist there was a law student, and she was just working there, working her way through college. And she takes me into the conference room and says, "Doc, you're black." Okay. I heard you say that, yeah, you're adopted. You don't know what race you are. You're black. And they're treating you black. Said, patients will come in here. We'll get some white patients from out in the country, and they'll see you. And they say, I ain't having my eyes examined by no nigger. And they turn around and leave. And she said, and that's why the staff treats you the way they do. They see you as black. It doesn't matter if you know or not, you are.
Yeah.
And she really helped me, and we became close. And then, yeah, she was the crazy one that we dated. But, she was right. And I really respected her. And I never had anyone give me that kind of care and attention.
Yeah.
So we even talked about getting married. But the problem with that was the longer I was in Columbia, the more my tan faded. And I became lighter and lighter. Eventually, the owner said, I'm not paying to put you in a hotel anymore. I want you to move to Columbia permanently. So she went back with me to the beach. That was after about 3 months. And we were packing everything. And she saw pictures of my parents for the first time because I didn't bring them with me to the hotel I was staying in. And she goes, who are these people? I said, that's my parents. And she's like, oh my gosh. And that was the first time she saw me without my amber colored contacts and saw my blue eyes, and she freaked out.
Oh,
She
wow.
said, you lied to me. I said, I didn't say nothing. I
Yeah.
didn't say I was black. You said I was black.
Right.
So she became very concerned. She did not, she was very racial proud. She still is. She's a political consultant now. Um, and she said, you've got to prove to me that you're really black. So I said, okay.
Like, but I don't know.
So yeah, I don't know. So
Oh
going
my
back to
gosh.
mom again. And I said, okay, mom, I need to know, can I see my adoption papers and see if it says anything about my race? And this is about the fifth time I've asked her. And she repeats the same old lies. No, you were born white. Your father was or one of your parents was a rocket scientist. One was a brain surgeon. The medicine turned your hair curly and made you brown. I said, well, I want to look at it myself and
Yeah.
see, because I said, my girlfriend is black and she wants to know if I'm black or not. And mom went stone cold.
I
So
bet.
she said, you said you were dating a law student. I said, yeah, she's black. She's gritting her teeth. How black is she?
Wow.
It's like, I don't know how to answer that, mom.
Yeah.
And she's like, is she kind of light like that one Miss America that posed nude in the magazine, or is she the other kind? But oh, okay. So I gave it a thought. I thought, okay, who can I compare her to? And said, okay, she's not the color of Vanessa Williams. She's more the color of Oprah. But mom likes Oprah. Everybody likes Oprah.
Yeah.
But mom got mad and stormed off. And I thought, well, I just wasted my time there. But she came back out and she had a single piece of paper from my adoption file. And this one had my birth mother's age and her race. She's 23 and she was white when I was born. On the birth father side, it was completely blank. And I've heard other
Mm-hmm.
adoptees say that it was blank.
Mm-hmm.
And I'm saying, Mom, why is the birth father side blank? She goes, oh, she probably slept with so many men that she didn't know which one it was. Oh, okay.
Yeah, great.
But one of them was a rocket scientist? Okay.
Yeah.
How did you know
But
that?
we did know that.
Yeah, we didn't know that. So
Have you ever left a therapy session feeling like you achieved major breakthroughs, only to discover that the issues you wanted to eliminate continue to sprout up and grow? With somatic mindful guided imagery, we get to the root of your symptoms easily, gently, and efficiently, so you can spend less time weeding and more time cultivating.
I go back to my girlfriend and say, okay, this is what I was told. I had never told her that mom told me one of the parents was a rocket scientist and one was a brain surgeon. And my girlfriend says, well, how did she know that? I really goofed up here. She said, how did you know that one is not black? And mom said, well, there are no rocket scientists and brain surgeons that are black.
Oh, wow.
Yeah, that wasn't a good thing to say.
No.
And my girlfriend went off and she's just laughing hysterically. She goes, for somebody so smart, you're stupid. She said, that's a lie. Your mother is lying to you. She said, if there was a brain surgeon and a rocket scientist that got together in small town Indiana and they did the nasty and had a baby, it's like, why would they give their baby to a couple crackers like your parents? It's like, I mean, how unlikely is that? I thought, okay, it is unlikely. It made me feel good at the time for the 10 years that I believed it. So when people ask me, when did you come out of the fog? I think that was the first step. Okay.
Yeah.
Mom has been lying to me.
Yeah.
And I started researching the medication and I could not find the medication anywhere in my records or anywhere in the literature where a medication would do that. I mean, some people have chemotherapy and their hair comes back curly.
Mm-hmm.
Some people have, there's medication or supplements you can take to tan yourself, but there's nothing that made sense to me. So I thought, okay, this is the first time I really realized that my parents have been lying to me my whole
Mm-hmm.
life.
Yeah.
But
Wow.
that really didn't save the relationship though. So
Yeah, she was kind of very abusive, verbally, physically abusive to you, and you kept hanging in there for a long time. I mean, why did you do that?
as as an adoptee, we get we have very low opinion of ourselves, and we just take it, and we just take
Yeah.
the abuse we think we're supposed to. So yeah, this is the first woman that really made me feel good about myself.
Mm,
I was really happy when I was with her, and in the beginning, the first 6 months or so, it was wonderful.
yeah.
But then after this happened and I became more and more white, we just drew more and more distant. And I went to church with her, and she always kept me at a distance from her friends because her
Hmm.
friends didn't. I never met them, but they didn't like me. I was white. They
Yeah.
called me the Pillsbury Doughboy behind my back.
Yeah.
They said, "You go." He's Indiana white, so you go buy some paint. You want the whitest paint they got. You don't ask for bone or eggshell. You ask for Indiana white because that's as white as it goes.
Oh,
so,
wow.
so his family's Indiana white. So
Wow. Yeah.
yeah, eventually we broke up, and it was not a good breakup.
No, it wasn't.
It's still affecting me today. That
I bet.
that complaint she filed damaged
Yeah.
my ability to. I just left. I didn't fight it and say, the medication I used on her eye cured it, and it wasn't approved in South Carolina at the time, but it was a few months later.
Oh my
And but I,
gosh. Wow.
yeah, it was just a very common medication. And in Indiana, we were more advanced than South Carolina, so I had it on my person, and that's what I used when she scratched her eye. Um, but I didn't fight it. I just left the state. I thought, this is nuts. I'm done
Yeah.
trying to be black in the
Right.
summertime and trying to identify white in the wintertime. I don't know what I am. I'm
Yeah.
done with this whole game. So I just moved away. I didn't fight the suspension. The suspension took place, and it was just never really reinstated, and that hurt me with Medicare. So I haven't been
Wow.
able to. They never released my Medicare number to be transferred to Indiana, so that hurt my billing for the rest of my career.
Yeah. Yeah. You'll have to
So
read the
yeah,
book
that
and get the nitty gritty on the whole story, listeners.
most people don't ask me about her, but yeah, um, yeah, that was really something.
Yeah, it
And so
was.
yeah, if you read the book, Granny's Cat is me coming out of the fog.
Yes, definitely.
Yeah, and when I realized that, boy, your grandparents were really, really racist, and your parents were
Yes.
racist.
Yeah.
Um, yeah,
Yes.
that was when I was really coming out of the fog and understanding.
Yeah, it's funny
You know,
how like you just go through life and you don't even you hear that, what was going on, you see what's going on, but you don't it doesn't compute like what really is happening. Like it's just
right?
everyday life for you. And so you're just, that's just what
Yeah,
they called the cat. I mean, you know.
it was. Yeah, that was the cat's name,
You
and
don't
the
think
cat was
about it.
black. Yeah, I
Yeah.
didn't think about it, and never thought about it when I moved out and went to college. I mean, that was just
Yeah.
in the back memories. And thought,
Yeah.
oh,
And it's
okay.
funny until you have to really tell someone, you're like, oh, wait a second, that's not good. Like,
Yeah,
it's like the light bulb goes on, definitely. So you
it
talk
doesn't.
about your birthday and how you struggle around that time. Tell us what you felt and experienced regarding that time of year around your birthday.
Um, I was very, very sad and withdrawn. It was especially hard because my parents' biological son was 3 days after mine, so our birthdays were always lumped together.
Mm,
He wanted this big celebration, these big presents. I wanted nothing. To say I don't want anything. I don't want to celebrate, and that would make my parents mad. So there was me getting nothing and
oh,
him
wow.
getting this big celebration. If there was a party, I might have one friend there, and he'd have like 20. it's and then when I got to college, especially, I would run away and hide during my birthdays. Um, the one birthday I spent at the beach, it made me so depressed. I thought, I'm done with this. I'm just going to go for a long swim
Yeah.
because I thought there's got to be a way. In the book, I go into more detail about being 27 and 28 because I thought, you know, a lot of adoptees are suicidal.
Yes.
And I thought when I was 27, that was the best time. I mean, look at Jimi Hendrix died, Jim Morrison, Robert Johnson. they all died at 27. So I thought, that's the time. If I'm going to do it, this is the time.
Mm.
And I just didn't want anyone to know that I committed suicide, because then that would make them feel bad. I'm an adoptee and I'm always worried about how other people are thinking.
Yeah.
So I thought, I'll just go out swimming. I'll just keep swimming until I'm exhausted, and then I'll be lost at sea. And you can't prove that I committed suicide. So that's what I attempted the day before my 28th birthday, because I wanted to do it while I was 27 still. That sounded cool to me. But I did swim and I did go under, but I ended up, the storm was coming in and it blew me back onto the shore. And I thought, okay, here I am, God. What do you want me to do now?
Right.
And so
Wasn't meant to
that
be. Wasn't meant to
wasn't
happen.
meant to be. So that was the worst birthday I ever had. And after that, I met the girlfriend and started feeling better about myself. And I never felt that way about my birthday again. I would
Mm.
still try to plan a trip or go away camping, um, do something just to get away from it, just to keep my mind occupied. Um, but when my daughter was born, she was born just 2 days after my birthday. So
Mm.
then that took care of it. So my daughter's
Yeah.
birthday was my birthday. I never had to think about my birthday. What are we going to
Right.
do?
Yeah. Yeah.
We're going to Chuck E. Cheese. That's what we're going to do.
So being a adoptee, how did that affect your decision? Because you adopted two children. How
Right.
did being an adoptee play into becoming an adoptive parent?
Um, yeah, I didn't get married. I became reacquainted with a woman I knew in college, and we started dating and we got married. We talked about having kids, but it wasn't a big priority. Her sister had had a very difficult pregnancy, and we thought, no, we're just enjoying the way we are. If it happens, it happens. If it doesn't, it doesn't. That's fine. Um, but the priest who married us came in for an eye exam, and he was talking about how cancer affected his eyes.
Mm.
And I spent a lot of time talking with him. I really like the guy. And I asked him, well, how do you reconcile cancer with God? I mean, you're such a good person. How do you justify that God gave you cancer?
Hmm.
He said, cancer is a gift. I said, come again? He said, yes, it's a gift from God. Everything that you get is a gift from God. And he said, this is knowing that I'm terminal, has had me make my decisions of what I wanted to do with the rest of my life. I asked him, if I have something that's going to take 15 years to accomplish, can I do that? And I said, probably not. I said, how about five? Yeah, five. They gave him 5 to 7 years.
Mm.
So he applied for a grant from Eli Lilly and went to Spain and studied Spanish, became extremely fluent. He was already fluent, but he became really good with Spanish, and he studied woodworking techniques. And then he came back and he would take groups from his church to Haiti and Mexico. Haiti and Mexico, to build houses a couple times a year. And
Mm.
then he was a chaplain on cruise ships in between them. So he said,
Wow.
yeah, God blessed me. I thought, and when I was explaining that to my wife, we're thinking of the parable of the talents and think, okay, so what talents do we have that we're not using?
Mm.
So that means all the struggles you had in your adoption, that is something that you should be using. That's why God gave it to you.
Yeah.
So that's when we decided that we would try to adopt transracial babies. We made it very specific because that's where my level of expertise was.
Yeah.
So we went to Catholic Charities and told them that's what we wanted. And biracial babies are no more popular in that time than they were when I was born.
Yeah.
So yeah, we went right to the top of the list, and we ended up adopting two children. So yeah, my adoption was 100% the reason why I adopted children.
Yeah. How did you finally find out your ethnicity? Tell us that story.
When we went to the hospital, it came in layers. When we went to the hospital, my my daughter was born, and we weren't in the delivery room, but we were at the hospital at the time, and the nurse was bringing her back and forth between the birth mother and our room, because the birth mother hadn't completely decided yet. And there was like 3 in the morning, they bring her in, and this black nurse is in there and teaching us how to change diapers because neither of us were ready for it. And we asked her, "Can you tell what race she is?" And she's told me, well, she's looking her over and said, "I'm looking for pigment blotches. There's pigment blotches on biracial children." And the mother's definitely white. So, and she was jaundiced also, so it was hard to tell.
Mm-hmm.
But she didn't have any pigment blotches. And my wife is elbowing me. I thought, "What?" She says, after the nurse left, she says, "You have pigment blotches." I said, "I do?" She says, "Yes." Yeah. So that was the first clue that I really did have African roots. So that made me feel good. It was a little odd timing there, but it made me feel pretty good that I knew what I was. But it wasn't until much later that 23andMe came around. Mm-hmm. And my kids also wanted to know what they were. My son in particular, he could have been anything. He really was getting some of the same treatment. The kids at school wondering what he is, and he knows what he is. He's met his birth father, but they're still questioning him. So he's wondering. So we get 23andMe kits, and we're saying we're going to put this all to bed.
Yeah.
So we find out that he is really Sicilian.
Yeah.
His great grandmother was from Sicily, a first generation. And that was my confirmation that my father was black. It was listed there. I mean, his father was black too, but he didn't know that his great grandmother was from Sicily. So that was kind of fun.
Yeah.
So then I'm fully convinced that I am German, Irish, and black. So I was right to go to Germany. I really was. Those people were right when they told me I was German.
Right. So your adoptive mom made you promise not to search or find or meet biological family until she passed, but that kind of was a hard promise to keep in the end. Share about your reunion, whatever you want to share about that.
Yeah, I did agree to that because my older brother was also adopted, and he agreed to that. He was a very strict rule follower, and he still is. So I was kind of following his lead. He was the older one. Says, "No, mom says no, we don't need to." I just wanted to see what race I was, but mom knew if I saw that paperwork that I would find out who I was, and I would find my birth mother. So she just continued to refuse. It started when my daughter was 12, and we were all sitting in the living room. I'm watching the local news, and they're covering an apartment fire on the south side of Indianapolis, and they're interviewing one of the residents, and there is my daughter's birth mother. And we've exchanged pictures back and forth. She visited with her. Both kids got to visit with both their parents for the first year and a half, and then both of their parents had other kids, and they were done. So we continued to send pictures and letters, and they would sometimes make artwork and send it to their birth family. We would never hear anything back. It would go through the adoption agency. So it was not closed, not open. It was a hybrid. So we knew what she looked like. And when my daughter saw her mother on television crying because everything she owned was burned up, she went into a deep depression, and I really felt for her. So we called the agency or emailed the agency and said, "Can we have a visit?" And the birth mother said no. And we kept it up. We'd send pictures and letters and ask for a meeting. Birth mother always no, no, no. And my daughter would just be crushed every time the answer came back no. And we were really worried. So she even shaved her head there. And this went on for over a year. And finally, the social worker called and said, "The birth mother still says no, but her mother says yes." So would she be willing to meet her grandmother?
Mm.
Yeah. So they arranged a meeting at the adoption agency, and the birth mother had to surprise us. She actually showed up with her mother, so they both came together, and that was very, very emotional. That was the first
Yeah.
reunion that I witnessed, and I saw something I didn't expect. I didn't ever consider what the birth mother was going through,
Mm.
and when I saw the tears of joy, and my daughter looks just like her birth mother, and
Mm.
she acts just like her birth mother, and they were just hugging and crying and talking about their similarities. And she was so happy that the decision she made 13 years ago to let us raise her daughter was a good one. And I thought, oh crap. So I said, I got to do this for my birth mother. So
Yeah.
she's might be out there worrying all this time. I did the
Mm.
math. She would be 75 at that point. I said, and I got to do it, and I got to do it now. I can't wait until my adoptive mother dies. So I wanted her to know that I'm okay, and I turned out well. So how to do that? Oh, my wife is very crafty, and she remembers what was being said about my the rocket scientist thing and the brain surgeon. She said, "Well, let's go to the university and see." And she ordered yearbooks from the university, and we were concentrating on pre-med and engineering and aerodynamics classes and things like that. We I still thought they had to be a student. That's the only way they would be together, and I'm not finding anything. I mean, I saw one black guy in the aeronautics club and looked him up. He's a bus driver in Nebraska. It's like,
Mm.
okay, that's not him. I mean, there's just not enough there. So we decided we were going to go confront my adoptive mom one more time. This time, my wife went with me, and my wife had a really good relationship with my adoptive mom. They got
Mm.
along really, really well. Um, so we took pictures of the reunion of my daughter and her birth mother, and thought maybe that would move my adoptive mom. And I said there was something peculiar about her adoption papers, and I wanted to see if I could see mine to compare, just to see if it's the same way. And mom didn't say anything. She just got up and went back into her bedroom, came back out, and she brought in a big envelope, an old brown brittle envelope. And it had mine and my brother's name on it. Said, "Give to them when I'm dead."
Mm.
So she hands it to me, and I pull out a wad of mimeograph pages. You remember what mimeograph pages look like?
Yeah.
And I'm looking through there, and I immediately see this is my brother's adoption records. And it has both his mother and his father's name on
Oh,
it. I go,
wow.
holy cow. And they're familiar names because,
Oh,
you
wow.
know, yeah, they were families that were not far away. And so I pull out my phone, let's look her up. And within seconds, I'm looking at her obituary, and
Mm.
she looks just like my brother's daughter. And
Wow.
I'm upset. I'm really, really upset. I said, "Oh, his birth mother's dead." Mom said, "She can't be dead. She's younger than me."
Mm.
What? And that triggered me. I'm triggered again. So I'm saying, Mom, there's a hell of a lot of people lying in the cemetery who were born after you. I'm
Yeah.
telling you, this is her birth. This is his birth mother, and this is her obituary. And then Mom didn't say anything. Then I followed the link to the father, and I saw his obituary. And they died
Mm.
within 6 months of each other,
Oh,
about 10
wow.
years prior. And they were married to each other. Well, that's a surprise.
Hmm.
So, I'm just scanning. It's easy to find this stuff. I said, they were married for 40 years. So I'm doing the
Wow.
math. So they married each other 9 years after my brother was born. Huh. And I see that he had three half sisters by another name. So I'm putting the pieces together and said, okay, his mother was married to another man, and he was serving in Vietnam. She had three daughters. She had an affair with my brother's father, and put my brother up for adoption without telling anyone.
Mm.
So he was a big secret.
Yeah.
That's the best I can figure from what I'm reading here. And I said, Mom said, yeah, or my mom said, that's right. What do you know about it? So when they first adopted my brother, his birth mother stalked them. So I didn't know all this. And she would come by the house and just kind of peek in or look
Mm,
in from the road, see him playing. And she decided, somehow my mom knew that she decided that they were a good home for him. And so she quit doing it. She just let it go. And they did, after she divorced the man, her first husband, she married my brother's father, and they were married 40 years. And it seemed like they had asked him for a reunion. And it was just a few months before she died.
oh, wow.
So I'm reading all this and I'm in tears. I said, so his birth mother and birth father probably knew that they were terminal. And the one thing they wanted to do was
Yeah.
meet the son that they had together.
Mm,
And my mom said, yeah. And he said, no. You knew about this? She
wow.
said, yes. She said, he promised me he wouldn't search for them until after I was dead. And he just didn't care about meeting them anyway. Like you said at the beginning, it's harder to get guys to talk about it. And he was like that. He put that completely in a different
Yeah.
compartment and never talked about it. And
Mm,
I thought, oh my gosh. And all the time I'm going through this exchange with mom and dad, my wife has picked up the envelope and she's taking pictures of all my records,
yeah.
like it's Mission Impossible or something.
Right.
So then I'm done arguing with mom about my brother, and I look at mine, and I'd seen what my wife had done. So I just said, "Oh, okay, here you go," and I gave it back to her because I had everything. I had all the
Mhm.
information. And she goes, "You don't want to keep it?" And I said, "No, I just wanted to look at it. I saw what I wanted to see." And then she took it and put it away. And then my wife took over from there, and she's quite a detective.
Yeah.
So she started searching, and my birth mother has a very, very common name. This is going to be a long shot, but we still went back to the university and looked up that name in the records, and there she was.
Yeah.
I came home from work one day, and my wife had a little package for me. Oh, look, I got you something. I thought, what's this? It's a yearbook from the college. I thought, okay, we've been through this before. She's not in here. She goes, no, she's in this one. How do you know? Why would she be in this one? I said she graduated early. She was extra smart and graduated in 3 years instead of four. But,
Mm,
oh, wish I would have thought of that.
yeah.
And she's flipping through the pages. Here. Yeah, look, here she is with a bunch of other students. Look how small she is. That's why you're so short. She's flipping through. This is the face. These are your eyes. This is your mouth. I said, okay. I said, this is probably her. Same name. I'm not going to argue with that. That's
Yeah.
good. Said, but where is she now? He says, glad you asked. She had already found her address. She had retired from the university where she taught elementary education, and she lived just 15 minutes away from where I grew up.
Wow.
And so I thought, well, now what do we do? Okay. My So I don't know if I want a reunion. I said, I don't know if I'm going to be intruding on anything. I said, I'm okay not knowing. I've already set my identity. I've gotten over my crisis. Um, I don't want to interrupt if she has a happy life and she's never told anyone. And my wife says, there are no AKAs. There's no name changes. There's no evidence that she was ever married. There's no evidence that she ever had any kids. She
Wow.
says, you're it.
Wow.
And so we dwelled on that for a while, and I could search some of the same sites she was searching, and I couldn't find it either. I was her only child. I thought, okay, let's go see. So we pick a night and drive by her house, and she's at the end of a cul-de-sac, and it's dusk, and so we have to turn around in the cul-de-sac, and a woman's figure comes to the window, and I go into full asthma attack. It's like, oh my God, there's my birth mother.
Wow.
I want to go in and say hi. No, I can't go in and say hi. Okay. But after that, I see that she's alive and that's where she lives. And I write her a letter telling her everything I wanted to tell her, that I was born at this hospital on this date. She would know that. And I just wanted to let her know I was adopted here. I grew up in this town, and she, I went to this school. I He went to college, became an eye doctor. This is my office. I put it on letterhead so she know I wasn't scamming. She could,
Hmm.
Google that, look that up, and see that I was a real person. Who I was. I got married, and I have two kids now. And just want to let you know I'm fine. And here's my contact information. If I don't hear from you, that's fine. I understand. But if you want to have a relationship, you can call me anytime. So a few days later, she called me.
Mm.
And I didn't take the first phone call, but when I called her back, I said, "Yeah, I would like to meet with you." She said, "Well, that weekend was Mother's Day." And she says, "I do not deserve a visit on Mother's Day.
Mm.
Save that for your adoptive mom. But let's um, let's plan on another time." So the following week, we got together.
Yeah.
And she was still living with the same woman that drove me to the hospital. So when I drove up, they were both standing on the front porch waiting for me. And her wife was just as happy to see me because she remembers all this. There's three people that know that I was born. It was the birth mother, the birth father, and the birth mother's wife. They're the only
Yeah.
three people that ever knew that secret. And she was just grinning from ear to ear. She told me a little bit about herself, and then she says, "I'm going to leave and let you guys catch up." And my wife had made a whole big scrapbook about my life from birth with lots of little baby pictures
Mm.
and grade school embarrassing pictures, laying on the rug, naked on the bearskin
Yeah, we
rug,
all have
you
that.
know, full diaper. Here you go. So yeah, we laughed at every picture, and it stopped when my my wife and I's first date, and then just said to be continued because that's
Mm.
either I think that's all my wife had time to do.
Yeah.
So then she told me all about her, and she'd never been married, and her and Wanda were a couple, and that's fine. I'm fine with that.
Hmm.
And her she wasn't close to her biological or her family because just being gay, they didn't really want to have anything to do with her. I mean, she
Mm.
had a little contact with her nephew, her brother. No contact with him. Um, so yeah, I was it. So that
Yeah.
was one of the better decisions I made. I brought that back into her life. You've got a family, and
Yeah.
we still talk. Talked to her a few days ago. I have to make some boundaries
Mm.
because of my adoptive kids. It kind of hurts my wife being an adoptive mother to see me with my birth mother, as I don't refer to my birth mother as mom,
Yeah.
and my kids, since they after the reunion of my daughter, it didn't go well after that. So they have
Mm.
no connection with their biological families. And then it's like, okay, let's go see your other two grandmas. It's like we just
Yeah.
that was just too much for them.
It's
So
confusing. Yeah.
very confusing. That's a good word for it. So we've put up boundaries and they've respected it. Um,
Good.
if there was a school event and I said, "Do you want to invite her?" And they sometimes yes, sometimes no. I said, "Okay, we'll invite her."
That's good. Yeah. That's great. So I want to ask you, why did you write Born Without a Race, and what message do you hope to convey by telling your story?
I wrote it during the pandemic because I was deemed non-essential. So eye exams were not essential unless it's an emergency.
Hmm.
So I had to come to the office and sit and wait. And if somebody had an emergency, I could see them. And if they didn't, I didn't. My house is pretty far. It's a good half hour away from the office. So I just came into the office anyway. And I was sitting there and I got bored reading. So I started writing different essays about the things that had happened to me now that I understood my race and how that applied. It's like, oh my gosh, they were identifying me as black. Like I remember getting pulled over as a teenager, driving, doing nothing.
Mm.
I remember the store detective following me around in the store when I'm with my two brothers. They single me out and search my pockets. It's like, why?
Wow.
So I just keep writing these little essays, and pretty soon I put them all together, and it's a pretty good sized book. And I shared it with a few people, especially people that were in the book. like Pi was the first person I sent it to. That's my old college roommate.
Mm-hmm.
And he said, "This is good." He says, "You got to get this published." I thought, I just wanted you to read it because you were in it so much. And other people, some of my patients that are curious about me, and we've had talks about my race and my adoption. So
Wow.
I sent them copies and they said, "This is good." So I thought, okay, so I'll publish it. But I became non-essential during the pandemic, and then I became essential again, and there was a lot of backlog. So I didn't really
Mm-hmm.
have a lot of time to put in publishing. I did query some publishers and some agents, and I almost never heard back from them. I had a couple that really liked it. I just felt uncomfortable with selling the story, just
Mm.
handing over the rights to it and what they would do
Yeah.
with it.
Yeah.
So I don't know if I wanted to share the message of being adopted and racial identity, but I really didn't know how, so I just self-published it and then made it available on Amazon, and I'd send it to people, links to people that asked about it, and that's all I've done with it.
Yeah. So what do you hope to accomplish by putting it out there?
I would like for adoptees to read it and understand that there are people like them. I would really like for adoptive parents to read it, and some of them that have read it have commented me that well, this has been really helpful.
Nice.
So when you adopt a child, there's more than just the physical aspects. There's also the emotional, intellectual. So you can't just adopt a child and expect them to be like you.
Yeah.
Um, so when we adopted children, we opened up all kinds of different things for them to try to discover their likes. That's what I would want adoptive parents to do.
Yeah.
Try to find out what your kids like, what they don't like. I was never given that.
Yeah.
Yeah. And really adopt the child for the child. You have to put the child first.
Yeah. What would you like struggling adoptees to know?
I would like them to know that there are a lot of people out there like them. I would like for them to join some of the support groups because that's been extremely helpful.
Yeah.
Talk to people like you. If you're an adoptee that cannot find your family, read stories about people that did, because there's a lot of stories that people who went to great lengths to find their family and now wish they hadn't. You may not like what you find. And if you do find, if you are one and you have these options, find out what other people have done to find their families and, follow some of their examples and some of their leads.
Yeah. Yeah. Well, thank you so much for coming on today. Like I said, it's difficult getting men on the show and to open up about their stories and especially transracial. So thank you so much for being vulnerable and coming on the show. Thank you, Karma Crew, for listening today to such an important topic about transracial adoption. If you would like to share your story on the podcast, get in touch with me. You can email me at mindyourownkarma@gmail.com. Someone out there is waiting for you to tell your story so they can feel validated. Are you struggling with adoption trauma and want to find out how somatic mindful guided imagery can help? somatichealingjourneys.com if you want to know more about me and somatic mindful guided imagery. I do free consultations. Come talk to me and let's find out how somatic mindful guided imagery can help you. If you are struggling with suicide or suicidal ideation, don't forget to call 988 in time of need. As always, take what you need and leave what you don't. And always remember to mind your own karma. I will see you next time.
This podcast is created for educational purposes by the telling of adoption experiences. The views expressed in this podcast may not be those of the host or Mind Your Own Karma.